All right. Hi, everybody. Karen Holly back from Menopause Life and KH Essentials. And I'm really excited today because not a doctor, not a pelvic floor therapist, but today we have an entrepreneur in the space of women's health. And I am so pleased to introduce you to Emily Sauer. Emily, say a quick hi.
Hello.
So a little bit about Emily and what we're going to talk about today. So in 2017, Emily had this amazing idea. So I should also preface this by one of the things I love about Emily and that we have in common is she is a huge self-care advocate. So she believes by patients for patients. And that's kind of the lead in I wanted to do for this 2017 idea she had, which she's going to tell you about in a little bit. But by 2018, she launched not a medical device, but a wearable
An
intimate,
intimate wearable.
yes, an intimate wearable device that's really designed to help women and or couples that experience deep pelvic pain. And so she co-founded the company or founded the company Ohnut, and she's going to talk a little bit about it. But also in the last 3 years, she has founded or co-founded Lady Bit Parts or Lady Bit League Pain Perception Project, as well as up and coming. She's in the middle of launching the Pelvic Gym, which we'll talk about at the end of the interview. But without further ado, Emily, let's
Oh,
talk about
you just
our
you just
topic for
dropped so
today.
many golden nuggets that I wanted to land on. So like, let's talk about that and that and that. Oh goodness, yeah. So I appreciate you. So it's funny, actually. I just want to talk about the intimate wearable, the medical device. So Ohnut, for those of you guys who are new to it, it is a wearable that's designed for anyone who experiences deep pain during penetration. So endometriosis, bladder pain. We can go through a lot of those causes, postnatal complications. We'll go through that later. But oftentimes, and also you said it's a product for couples, which is wonderful. So it is just as like a brief intro as to what it is.
Yeah.
Again, wow. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited that I feel like all of the information is coming out at once.
It's okay. It's totally okay. I know there's so much to talk about. So stepping back, we're gonna totally go into Emily's going to talk about pelvic pain and kind of what are the most common causes, what's normal, what's not. Then we're going to move into myths, right? Like we've all heard about the big penis myth, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to move into what you all can do about that. And I love the fact that you're showing the Ohnut now. So show it because that's your invention, and it's taking off and it's helping thousands of women around the world. So show us what the Ohnut is.
Yeah. So this is it. This is our dear friend Ohnut. So as I was saying, so it's designed to help anyone who experiences pain deeper in the pelvic floor during penetration. So it can the way that it works is it's worn at the base of a penetrating partner. So imagine my finger is a penetrating partner, be it a penis, a toy, or a dilator, and Ohnut is worn at the base of that. So imagine that Fisher Price stacking donut toy, kind of like that, but way cooler. And what it happens is during penetration, it compresses down kind of like a bumper. So it stays outside of the body. But the beauty is that you can add rings or take them off at any time during any position so that you can really open up a dialogue about how it's feeling. Is this position okay? Let's do this, let's do that. And stop focusing necessarily on how you're doing or what you're doing and really just be able to focus on your body and your partner's body together.
Right, because you take the pain out of it. And so many women, if we go into a point of pain, then all of a sudden we're focused on the pain and then we're not enjoying the intimacy or the sexual intercourse that we're having, right? Which
Yeah.
can be so pleasurable.
And the fear. So going into actually how Ohnut started, I had experienced deep pain during sex for my entire adult existence and never had the confidence really to ever speak up about it to any partner. So the one time I did speak up about it was to practitioners every year, to my gynecologist, and they really didn't address it at all. I was just kind of dismissed with use lube, have a glass of wine, it'll be fine, that's normal. And so at that point in time, when didn't have the language or the confidence to really take initiative myself, and then doctors didn't recognize it as their problem, then what was I left with other than to assume that pain during sex was normal and my problem?
Hmm.
And so at that point, the physical pain turned into something much greater than that. Was a sense of emotional disappointment, really. So whenever sex was painful, I felt like a failure to myself, to my partner. It's like almost like my identity kind of went out the window at at the very moment when we're supposed to be feeling really good about ourselves.
Mm,
So
that's
yeah,
beautiful, Emily. I mean, especially because when you and I met, we were talking about one of the parts of your journey that you love in this space is reducing the shame, right?
yeah.
And making these conversations so at the forefront that it becomes commonplace. And then women don't feel silly when they want to bring this topic up, and they're not abnormal by bringing it up, and that they know that there's many women that have the same problem. So
And it feels so good to bring up too. It's like so I at the way that Onut came to be, the actual idea was I was at a pretty low point emotionally and maybe not the healthiest relationship. And the amount of shame that I was feeling was just at its worst. And this idea of customizing penetration depth. If I could just control how deep penetration went, then maybe I wouldn't feel so badly about myself. And when I tried it out, I kind of went on Amazon and bought something that was similar, functioned similarly to change the depth of penetration. And when it worked, all of that shame and resistance and self-critique, all of that, those really almost like self-abusive feelings
mhm.
turned into its exact opposite, polar opposite. I literally wanted to tell everyone that I had had pain during sex, and I came up with this crazy idea, and it's fun, and it's kind of silly, and but it makes me love my body, and I could do things that I didn't think I could do, and I could try positions that I thought would be off the table forever, and my body's not broken, and I'm not. I was like, like you just whether or not you've had pain during sex, there are those aspects of our life that we're deeply embarrassed by and isolated by. And
Mhm.
that moment that we feel that we're not alone, then there's a power, there's a deep seated power, not only in like the dialogue that comes with it, but also the physiological response that comes with it too. When I feel a sense of safety in myself, then my body feels that sense of safety as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. I love your excitement around this. And I can totally relate. It reminds me of an interview we did with Susan Bratton, who's a sexologist.
Mhm, mhm,
And she talks a lot about helping women be grounded in their body. And
mhm.
whether you have a device or not, that's critical, right? And so if the Ohnut can help provide that, and I mean, also show people how stretchy it is
Oh my
because,
gosh, yeah, thank you for
yeah,
mentioning that. People
yeah.
always
I
think
mean,
it's really hard.
when Emily and I were first speaking, I was like, oh my God, it's kind of in a way, it could
It's
also serve as a cock ring for a guy to increase their pleasure. So it's not decreasing if your partner, if it's a male and female connection, you're not decreasing their
yeah.
pleasure, which is amazing, right?
People always ask us, how does it feel for a partner? That's one of the first questions people ask, which is fascinating considering that, primarily this was based off of the receiving partner who might be uncomfortable, and then the receiving partner is, preoccupied with the penetrating partner. But all of that to say is that our penetrating partners do enjoy the product because one, there's often a misunderstanding like if penetration hurts because it's going too deep, well, the penetrating partner shouldn't go so deep. It's their fault. They're not listening, they're not doing like XYZ. When in fact, the idea around intimacy and sex is that there is a trust there and you can let go a little bit and just be, as opposed to being so preoccupied with, am I hurting my partner? Uh,
Mhm.
there's also this idea that partners don't want to be causing pain and they feel a sense of responsibility and their own shame around that. So physically speaking, this kind of feels like it's not even there, honestly, because it warms up and then you get to that hip to hip sensation, which a lot of people really like. You can
Mhm.
go hip to hip, like really go for it and
Right.
not worry that you're going too far.
I
Um,
love that. I
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so You shared the story around the origin and how really it was your own advocacy for yourself, right? Because no one else was really understanding or stepping up, and there wasn't anything out there. So you went ahead, you invented this. How have you gone about educating women on what's normal and what's not, and what are some of the common causes of pelvic pain?
What's interesting is that I had no idea what was going on with my body for over 10 years, which is why I didn't speak up about it or even push a doctor to tell me more or even look online, because everything online that you look up is just like scary. So I legitimately started going to medical conferences. I went to sexual medicine conferences, pelvic floor physical therapy conferences, pelvic pain conferences, and literally got the education that all of us should have. Not to say that I am a master in any one of these areas. Obviously, I'm surrounded by people who are clinically trained in ways that I am not. But there's generally a misunderstanding. Maybe this is jumping the gun around around mechanical fit. That large penises are the cause of pain during sex, when in fact, okay, so maybe there is a partner that is a little bit bigger in one example, but what is actually happening in the receiving partner's body that is painful?
Hmm.
We stop asking about root causes when under the guise of this large penises causing pain assumption, when in fact endometriosis is a large cause of pain during sex. Although a lot of people have a hard time getting a diagnosis there, so it's that one's hard to assume. But postnatal complications, bladder pain, even constipation, menopause is also can be a like that time frame can cause pain during sex for lots of reasons. Cancer treatment. There are an infinite number, even stress. My goodness, people approach Ohnut. It's interesting because Ohnut comes with 4 rings, right? And so people often say, like, okay, like, oh, I'll just start with one. It's like, but then there's a hesitation to add another ring and a hesitation to add. So we always say start with 3, and it's not meant to be a progression. Like, it doesn't mean like the less rings that you use, the quote better you're getting, because on a random Tuesday, you might feel stressed and that might cause pain during sex. And like, that's okay. Use all 4. And then it encourages a check in with your partner every time too, so that you're on the same page, which is generally kind of the point of sex, anyways. So,
Right.
uh,
Oh my gosh. I also love what you said earlier about positions, right? So every woman, well, every woman, every man's different, right? And there are going to be some positions where deeper penetration is more comfortable than others. And so I love the fact that the Ohnut has those 4 rings, and you can change if you need them for different positions. And then an experiment. I love the experimentation and the fun around it for
yeah.
couples and or for self pleasure. Um
Can I just jump on that for a quick second?
yeah. Yeah.
I love what you said there, because so think about an experience where you were having sex and it hurt. How do you speak up? What do you do? Is it just like the ooh, like do you make a facial expression? Does your body just tense up? And then how does that actually come out of your mouth or body, so in a way that's communicative to a partner? The reason why so many people don't bring it up is because there's a fear that it might be offensive, that a partner might uh, internalize that like they're doing something wrong, and then it just kills the moment and sex is off the table. Whew, and the person who was in pain ruined everything, when in fact, when you're using Ohnut, the point of it is to experiment, is to try different rings, is to try different positions, so that if something isn't comfortable at the first try, it's like, oh, like let's add another ring. You're like, let's try this position. All of a sudden, possibility is on the table as opposed to hesitation towards ruining a moment.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And also, like you said, sometimes, I mean, and I'm speaking in a heterosexual relationship now where it's a man,
Sure.
men like manuals sometimes, right? And if
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that hurts, then they're going to be like, oh, that position's off the table. Can't do that again, right? Because they don't want to hurt, instead of just having the experimentation of knowing, oh my God, there's this amazing product that's comfortable, easy to use, and actually lets me have fun and lets my partner not feel hurt. So I
Yeah.
just think it's such a great invention, and I'm so excited that number one, you have the drive to do it, you have the tenacity to go to all the conventions, which kind of leads me into, we didn't talk about this in advance, but I know you can talk about it. On your pain perception project, that's
Yes.
kind of what led you into all of those interviews and all of the research that you did that helped evolve the Ohnut. And then I remember you and I were also speaking that during that research you did, you realized that, and we've talked about this with many other speakers, doctors are not trained. Certainly, a lot of them are not trained unless they take up the specialty in menopause, perimenopause, but also in these sexual issues. And
Mhm.
so I think you had a statistic that said almost 40% or less than 40% of fourth year med students felt like they had had enough education to have a meaningful discussion with their patient around sexual concerns. And that's big, right? So,
Around sexual concerns, yeah, and there's another stat is less than 40% of doctors even bring it up. It bring up sexual complications in a visit. Uh,
right.
Not to mention the fact that in a 15-minute appointment, untangling years of pelvic pain, uh, untangling years of pelvic pain, and then potentially creating a situation in which a doctor's skill set might not even be applicable, which they might
Mhm.
not be reimbursed for, is just it's a headache for them more so than an opportunity.
Right. And your research also showed, didn't it show 75% of women
Yeah.
have some level of pelvic pain? And that's
Mhm.
where we go back to that shame
Yeah.
of you really trying to continually spread the message of you've got to be your own self advocate. You've got to be your own self advocate. You've got to educate. And you're out in the field like I am doing the work to try and advocate on behalf of women so that more and more people become aware and we can solve these problems at a bigger level.
Yeah. I mean, 75% of women is actually only those who reported it. Imagine how many of us don't speak up. And that the number is actually much higher. And also the fact that most, or not many, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of women, even if there's a sensation of physical pain, don't even consider it to be pain because it's the assumption is that that's normal. And while pain is very common, it by no means is something that should just be dealt with. And you had mentioned what's normal and what's not. In any instance that so Onut, while it does help facilitate a lot of the psychological and physiological aspects of intimacy, it doesn't actually address the root problem. If there is a root cause that needs to be addressed. So hopefully when in coming in contact with the Onut brand, we give tools like the pain perception project so that there's an understanding of the clinical options like pelvic floor physical therapy, sex therapist, gynecologist, urogyne. There are all of these people who can help and who are trained in pelvic pain. Uh, yeah, I mean that in a way that you're not alone and having to just deal with something because culturally we're expected to deal with it.
Right. Were there, speaking of the normal, not normal, but common, were there in the pain perception project, were there certain types of pain that would kind of fit that category that you remember to be the most meaningful, where women are just assuming it's normal, but it really isn't? And you had to kind of say, hey, how many of you in the room are experiencing this? Did you know that that actually isn't normal? Like, was there,
Uh, so
besides,
actually, just to take a step back, the Pain Perception Project is an online intake form that's inclusive of sexual health and quality of life. Oftentimes, when we go to the doctor, they ask us about our like family history, our period status, and how many STIs if we've been pregnant. That's pretty much it. Not how we feel about our sex lives, how it could be impacting our work productivity. So the pain perception project is inclusive of those larger like life goal questions. And then once you're done with the questionnaire, it prints out into a PDF to facilitate dialogue with the doctor.
oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
So it's interesting and it is HIPAA compliant. So we don't use the data for any for anything. It's completely private.
And it helps the woman basically understand, okay, based on the way I answered these questions, here's some things I may want to bring up. And
Yeah.
you and I also spoke about endometriosis, which I think is probably one of the top three pain behind the scenes causes. And I know when I was in college and post college, I had it and I had to have 2 laparoscopies because the pain was so
Yeah.
severe when I was having sex that I was like, I want to enjoy my sex. And so what is going on? And, so sadly today, there's no way to uh, confirm that a woman's got it unless she has that laparoscopy. But I believe the more and more women's health changes and the more and more we learn, we
Yeah.
might be able to find ways through technology to detect it so that women can be helped earlier.
Yeah, there are. We actually did a collaboration last year. There are all these at-home diagnostic kits where basically you said there's a blood collection sample sent into a lab, and they're looking for early biomarkers to indicate uh, endometriosis in a blood sample, and ideally, which would result in like an at-home testing kit. So there
Yeah.
we are on the path. We are, and so many people are trying to do it. It's so exciting.
Well,
Yeah,
it's needed. I think there's a lot
yeah,
of women out there that don't know they have it,
yeah, yeah.
because uh, at 22 years ago is they didn't have any information on it when I was going through it. It was so little, like so little, and the technology was just a bust. So,
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
wow. Well, Emily, what other myths are out there besides the big penis one? Are there any myths in the pelvic pain space with sex, or is that the big one?
I would say, the maybe not necessarily myth, but misunderstanding is that the hard conversations are the ones we should avoid. Generally, we'll do anything not to talk about something that we're not confident in. Again, like I didn't talk about painful sex for over 10 years because I just assumed that everyone was having the best sex ever and I was alone in that experience. Meanwhile, it is ultimately the hard conversations that are the foundation for an even better, more exploratory, just more present, intimate experience.
Mhm.
Oftentimes when we go on autopilot and we just do the routine thing and we dodge things that are uncomfortable. I mean, we all know what it's like, especially in times of COVID, to be complacent in certain areas and just to kind of sit in our like bullshit,
Yeah.
uh, and but ultimately when we actually confront those those elements of our lives, yeah, then there is a shared dialogue and there is a shared understanding, and then the body responds, kind of like you were saying earlier. uh, a lot of what we see with Ohnut is not just like the physical enjoyment. I mean, people also, okay, here, sorry, I'm coming full circle. The misunderstanding around sex is that it is like just physical enjoyment, and physical enjoyment comes from a vibrator or your hand or like someone doing this thing. Are you facing that position? Are you wearing a certain thing? When in fact, the physical enjoyment that comes out, like what is our one of our strongest muscles is our brain. Where are we starting? Where does sex start?
Mhm.
And it starts up here. And when we open up that dialogue, when we feel good about our bodies, then pleasure isn't just a physical sensation, it's a sense of self.
So true. Yeah, you couldn't have said that better. And that's the message that we want to keep getting out to women, right? So I love that. So what besides the Ohnut, and I know people can go to ohnut.com, right? Oh,
Daco.
.co.
That's the
Um to purchase an Ohnut. What other things do you recommend through your research with the Pain Perception Project? What should women be doing?
well, primarily I think this just becoming educated really on what are the causes of pain during sex. And I think pelvic floor physical therapy is a really great resource that most people don't know about, and in some countries like France it's subsidized by the government postpartum. We are a little bit behind with the times in the US.
Totally. Totally. I say that anytime I'm talking to a pelvic floor person, I'm like, I lived in Europe for a couple years when I was younger, and this was so normal.
No, no, no.
So
Yeah.
normal. Yeah. Okay. So
So
pelvic floor therapy.
yeah,
Yep.
so one of the resources that we've actually created born out of quarantine. So the Ohnut team, we kind of it became glaringly obvious that pelvic PT was even more inaccessible when people couldn't leave their homes. Already, it's really tough with insurance and even geographic accessibility. Oftentimes, pelvic PTs are in urban areas. So how could we really create a bridge between all of us and providers who have the education that we're overdue, frankly. So we created a video platform that makes that bridge a bit more accessible. So you can do movement at home, mindfulness exercises at home with the guidance of a pelvic floor PT. So you can find that
And
on pelvicgym.co.
that's the pelvic gym. Yeah, I love that. Ugh. So what is next, Emily, for you?
A
With
nap.
I love that. Good. So I know it's been a crazy day, right? Um, besides the nap, do you have any other things that you're working on or future visions for
Yeah.
products
Oh my
like
gosh. I think that's the problem is I have too many ideas. But pelvic gym is a really wonderful opportunity. I think to really, whereas Ohnut comes from the sexual angle, sexual health angle, pelvic gym is really a bit broader. So anyone who has any kind of pelvic pain or chronic pain, like in the pelvic region or postnatal, or any kind of just short-term or long-term symptoms, can get a greater, almost like hands-on understanding through this digital platform, around what we can do at home, and then what we can do, what kind of services are available in office. So, and I think also digital health is really expanding, especially in the femtech area. So, products as medical devices, software as medical devices. There's a really big opportunity for sexual health and pelvic health to elevate in terms of quality of care, in the gynecological realm.
oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, because it's been underserved for nearly half a century,
Yeah,
so it's definitely got a lot of space to grow in the femtech space, med tech
yeah,
space. Um, and also, I think going back to your original kind of theme throughout this is encouraging women to always just speak the truth, right? Speak their truth so that they are ensuring that their doctors are well informed so that they can get the help. The more they keep it to themselves, it's then nothing can be done, right? So giving women that confidence to know they're not alone. Your pain perception project, the fact that it prints out something that you can actually have talking points for your doctor, I think that's brilliant because a lot of women don't know where to start. And right, the OB may not be that end state, right? Because a lot of OBs are the ones that don't know that, but a pelvic floor specialist might, a gyno, which is a new field that's only come about in the last 2 decades,
sure.
which is a critical, like if there's any woman on here listening that's in menopause, you should have your gyno and your gyno be partnering, because as you get into menopause, you're going to need a urogynecologist most
Yeah.
likely. Um, so anyway, well, what a thrill. Any last words before we part?
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things is, again, I think I know I've said this like a million times, but is starting the conversation around painful sex. And I think people are always like, well, how do you talk about it? How do you talk about it? It's like, just bring up Ohnut. It's got this silly name. It's these four squishy rings that a partner wears. And, you just kind of drop that in conversation and see how it goes. And you'd be surprised at how well it generally turns out. So I know that, so maybe just use Ohnut as an excuse to talk about painful sex if there's ever a loss of spark for whatever reason.
It's actually a great idea because you could be like, hey, honey, check this out. I mean,
It
that,
exists for a reason because enough people need
yeah,
it.
yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And
Thank
I'm
you.
really excited to see you at one of the upcoming medical conferences when we can all be back in person and if not in Zoom. And I wish you the best of luck in all of this stuff. And I know
Thank you,
we'll
Shimmy.
keep
The
in
best
touch.
of luck. I want to shimmy with it when I say that. No.
And we will put the pelvic gym info and the pain perception project info in the post when we post the interview. But I'm super excited that you took the time to share your brilliance with everyone.
Woo! Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful chatting with you. And thank you again for just creating a platform where so many people can really learn about, our bodies, what we live in every day.
You are so welcome. So welcome.
Yeah. All right, my dear. Well, thank